Welcome to MASTERCLASS. This is YouTube MASTERCLASS. We're through the school COURSERA, who sponsors us, and they're our team that grades all our papers, hands out of all the credits at the end. If you register with COURSERA, you have to taking this class unless you're already registered with the school and they give you permission to take the class through them. And that's something I hadn't said in my film criticism classes, and I'm Dr. Aaron Sheley. I got my PhD in 2020 at California Institute of the Arts. Because that PhD requires so many other PhDs already under your name, I had to get a lot of degrees at once, and I applied for all the schools, took the Coursera classes, took the classes there that I could, and through all of them, since it was an independent study at CalArts, they were allowing independent study at other school. But the real thing about getting your degree is there's still a lot of chances to do that because U.S. News and World Report in about 2018 called for culture relief, which is where the culture doesn't have the same influx of artworks coming into it. So they said, if you have a portfolio of the arts, send them to your school, send them to your boss, send them to someone who is in art management. And I actually have an art management job that I don't even use. It's like a job that's there, but I just try to manage my own art over to them because I'm like, nobody's really approached me except some Hollywood films, like the Hollywood film Mind Walk. I inherited just for being a friend to someone on the internet. Like, it's really weird how you can inherit films and not a copy of it, but I've since then been able to pronounce it Criterion. And we could go on all day about what I've done with my PhD. I just want you to know that I am really licensed to teach this class, and it's for Harvard. And Harvard's a good school. It's the best school in the world. It has all the best programs. I'm not saying that I'm the best film teacher in the world. No, there's a lot of better film teachers at USC and UCLA and NYU and American Film Institute and Columbia and all these great schools that make professors even more difficult to handle than me, but are way better professors, or easy to handle and are way better professors. Anyway, I'm not saying I'm at the top. I'm just the only one that volunteered to take the Harvard job because no one actually thought that was possible, and I knew it was when they built MasterClass because they were doing mathematical masterclasses through Harvard, and I thought, well, then they must be doing other Coursera courses. And they must be allowing film now because I did take a comparative lit course or two there, and a lot of their comparative lit is comparing to movies. And I'm like, so if we did do a bona fide film class, wasn't a very hard argument. People have been trying to set it up for years, and I'm at Harvard for volunteering. Not that I'm just like saying I volunteer for nothing in return, because there's always these you have to take this kind of deals. But it's also to make up for the fact that I graduated from Harvard with a PhD and I need to make up those hours in teaching. USC, I mean, they had given me a position at the D.W. Griffith Chair, and nobody thought I was worthy, even though I knew the whole story, and I didn't think I was worthy, and it was going to dissolve. But we found out some things about D.W. Griffith that I might as well tell you. First of all, he did found the Humane Society coming into cinema history, and he founded Hollywood, and he started United Artists with Chaplin, Pickford, and Fairbanks. And he made some of the biggest movies ever. And one thing that he did that's horrible that he's never forgiven for is he brought the government in to help make Birth of a Nation. And I thought, after all that escaping from the government, like electrocution of an elephant and reefer madness being bad, why, and this is something I'm still trying to find out if there is even a reason, why then was he so worried that his film was going to be a flop that he calls the government and has them redo it when he's already rebelling against Thomas Edison? If you know the answer to that question, send it in to me on Facebook or something, because I'm really dying to find out why he invited the government into his movie. Didn't they invent censorship codes so they wouldn't have to have the government come make their movie? So anyway, but Griffith was an amazing war hero, and he was in World War One and World War Two, and he was in this fighter plane with Louis Armstrong, and he'd already been friends with Louis Armstrong and all the others. But I will give you one thing, Masterclass. D.W. Griffith used to buy tons of weed for all his black jazz friends. Do you believe me? Not because he was atoning for the Birth of the Nation, that was way over, and it kept coming back out, and people kept saying it was the best movie ever. Like, black people would like it just because it's about them, and even though they get totally ranked in it, in today's standard is like, that's the rankiest thing I've ever seen, and I'm going, well, the government made half of it, come on, well, no wonder it's ranky. And Griffith had made some other stereotypes in a film called Greatest Question. So he messed up. We're not saying he didn't mess up, but that he used to be the one to buy weed for a lot of jazz musicians kind of makes me forgive him. So if anybody missed a detail, we're going to move right on to special effects class, and this is also a CalArts class, and they're the ones that draw all the cartoons in the background that hover my head. No, they're the ones that make it look like it's a different shot every time. I don't know how they do that, but there's somehow something up there in blue. I don't think that's been up there the whole time. And why there's stuffed animals up there is, yeah, because my ex put them up there, and I don't know where she is right now. I haven't seen her for a while, but she never got her stuffed animals back, and I'm not going up there, dude. I, my bones will break. I'm like Mr. Glass, dude. If I fall down a staircase, I'll break every bone in my body. So just because you're in my master class in my little quadrant of space, which I do get out and see the open air. I know you're all worried about the condition of your professor and why he even said he was a professor and all these things. And we could go on and talk about literary wars, but let's talk about the jazz singer. That's what I got here. This is the box set. And it's got this tape here because one of the coils on it broke and it snapped this plastic off. And then the jazz singer's here on Blu-ray. It's a Blu-ray of the jazz singer. It's got this big notebook you open. And I've read the story to it, not just in film history. Oxford World History has a good story of it. But the D.W. Griffith story does actually interact with this because, lo and behold, he was still a big director in Hollywood when the sound era first came on, and he had cobbled his money together for most of his projects after Intolerance was because it didn't make all of its money back, so he couldn't even pay for the next one. But that he had elaborate, huge sets is because he was really one of those in-crowd guys, and they would just build sets for him and make movies for him, and he would just walk on the set, film it, walk off, and that's really what you're supposed to do in the system. But that he would have some pretty revelatory flicks after birth is true, but The Jazz Singer was supposed to be a D.W. Griffith movie. That he was going to bring sound to the world is a true story, but did he win that one? No. I'm not saying he didn't win the best dude to ever offer pot to everyone, especially the black guys. Because back then, some of the black guys couldn't get the weed, and it was real hard. And I'm not trying to be, that's it. This is the perfect movie to discuss that. I'm going a little easy on my racial policy than I have before. See, for me, I'm not allowed to be racist because I'm a professor, and so professors aren't allowed to be racist, yeah? But you guys are students. If you want to someday be a professor, narrow it down, but really, if you're not planning on being a professor, but you just want to take this class, if I hear you at some time, any time in your life, say the N-word, I'm not going to come down on you. If I said it, I'd come down on myself because I don't use the word. But if anybody else used it, I'm not going to come down on them. I mean, cuss words are all over the place in my movies. I don't use racial slurs, but cuss words are all over. But it doesn't make me special, and it doesn't make me, superhuman. It just means that I'm trying to be polite as possible. So you try to be polite as possible. Well, if you're one of those dudes that uses racial slurs, let me just tell you, that doesn't mean you're racist necessarily. Because before I thought, well, if they use a racist word, they're suddenly total racist, right? And then I'm like, well, I've heard some people use racist words and they're being a little bit racist, but they themselves are not racist. And so that makes a lot of people nervous because then they're like, well, now we can't tell who the racists are. And I'm like, I doubt the real racists would be splurting out racial slurs right now to hide who they are. But these other guys that just got into a cyclone of language from the movie Belly as a joke are not some raging racist. Not like, I don't know how to put this. It's like not all Nazis, not all Klansmen are racist. Some people are just people and they follow the party for whatever political reason and never even get to the violent side of it. And I don't know enough about politics. This isn't really about politics. But I will say this. If you were to go to some of my, a cross-section of my redneck friends, and I know I'm kind of a redneck critic, and that's problematic, right? But if you were to go to my redneck friends, of all the movies they have saved over the years, and of all the movies they've seen the most, what would you rather expect it to be? Not Birth of a Nation, no, Belly. And I was talking to my black professor seriously over the airwaves or whatever, and he was like, so how's the racism in Colorado? And I was like, well, it's not that bad because really, this was a long time ago, because really, all my friends had copies of the movie Belly whether they were like freaking, neo-Nazis or not. I'm not saying any of my friends are neo-Nazis, but come on. So they had the movie Belly, and they're obviously not against it because they've had the movie that long. And they don't think they're going to LA anytime soon to track these locales down. And we would have heard about that, right, if they did. So I'm not too ashamed to say most of my redneck friends own the movie Belly. Why? Because the montage is so dreamlike that you can fall asleep to it. And the sound is so hip-hop that it beats you out to the sleep. And that everything goes smooth in that movie is weird. It's cool. Like the first time everything goes smooth for everybody. And the frickin' time they're watching Gummo, and it's already bizarre that Belly's like the favorite film of my town. And if I ever were to say to anyone, and anybody can listen to this, including my black professor, that my film that I made, Orgy of the Damned, for instance, my best film, or whatever's my best film, bipolar in quarantine, whatever, that if I were to say something so sacrilegious as, I think Orgy of the Damned's better than Belly, or even like Lazy Smoker's better than Belly, I'm telling you, my godfather would wrench me in half, bro. He'd show up in this room and kick my head off for trying to say that a movie's better than Belly after my town unleashed the great sailing of Belly. Now, we'll get off the subject because I can't talk to you too much about hip-hop and politics till I finish reading the book. But I got a ways to go on that book. I keep getting stuck on the same parts about Michael Jordan. Now, this is the jazz singer. Now, the reason we're bringing up race and class and gender, especially race here, I don't bring up class much, but race here, and class is a little bit in here, is the Jewish guy is the jazz singer. Now, you got to remember, they remade the jazz singer with Buddy Kaye, I think, and I can't remember who it was, but in the 50s, they remade it. Or in the 30s, it was with Buddy Kaye. But anyway, like in the 90s, or in the 80s, the jazz singer came out with Neil Diamond, and I wouldn't be surprised if they released it again. And it's always about this Jewish guy who has to perform song rites at his temple so he can progress his way through the Church of Judaism. And one of the ways he supplements himself on the side, but only because it's entertaining to others and fun for him, is being a jazz singer. Now, this movie is actually a silent film, shockingly enough. Like, most of it is silent with intertitles. But then you get to the actual singing, and it's really Al Jolson on the soundtrack, that they wired the soundtrack to play along during the Jolson parts that don't sync up perfectly, even in this perfect version that I'm holding before you. Well, not perfect, it's got tape on it, right? But that Al Jolson's voice was on it, but one of the ironies is in an early recording they had of the jazz singer, Louis Armstrong, and with D.W. Griffith directing him. Like, I don't know how you direct someone being a jazz singer, but they've got to do the whole performance on their own, So Louis Armstrong was up for the role. They were going to make a Griffith-Louis Armstrong movie. And the reason they didn't was mainly because everyone's like, but didn't he already do Birth of a Nation? Now, what you need to know is when he goes to jazz clubs, he puts on blackface. And now here we are again. Here we are again at the ultimate throwdown of what makes cinema suck. And this great movie, this appealing movie, this Jewish guy probably did really, at the time or even before, or whoever cares when, put on blackface and try to sing like a black person, and that jazz singers had to be black, and everyone knew jazz was black. But at the time, they were going for something even nicer than Birth of a Nation. See, Birth of a Nation effed everything up because they let the government in, and who knows what or was not D.W. Griffith. D.W. Griffith could challenge it either way. Well, I'm glad it's racist, he would say in some interviews. And then, I'm ashamed of myself horribly because it's racist. But he didn't even know. I don't even know if he saw the film. And I can relate to that. By this time in your career, like, I'm lucky to see the first 5 minutes of my movie. I hope everyone likes it. But you watch it when you're directing it, so you're like, okay, that went wrong. But I would never, even as the schlockiest B director in Hollywood, and I don't mean schlock as in blood and guts, I just mean the low-budget art film guy, schlocky. I would never bring the government into Hollywood filmmaking, bro. I mean, you can talk about them, usually talk smack about them, usually say, don't get your nose in our business, government. Or if you're Oliver Stone, you can make these lectures on what history was like and how there was a good, beyond good and evil side to all these guys. They did some good, and they mostly effed up, and that's government for you. But this movie is not trying to make a political statement, and neither was Birth of a Nation, except it was Civil War history, so it was trying to say, this is how you need to view the Civil War. And for D.W. Griffith only hearing from his own father about the South, I could tell you what I just found out about the North. They fought a good fight to the championship, bro. And even Southern slaves were telling him they fought valiantly, and that they would bow down before them and surrender before them because they were gods of the army. So those Northern soldiers were pretty good. And we'll have more on Northern soldiers later. But you know what's interesting about that is Griffith really didn't have any Northern soldiers except these guys that were trapped in a cabin. And I still don't know how they're trapped in that cabin. Because couldn't they just walk out and shoot at people? If they're shooting people through the cabin, couldn't they, like, go out in a blaze of glory since they're going to anyway? I don't know, bro. That part weirds me out. I wonder what they were even doing in there that got the Klan called on them. No, I'm not siding with anybody here, but there weren't really Northerners who were on the side of the Klan. Now, this movie's a little less lugubrious when it comes to charges against racism, and Griffith was kicked off this one because of the Birth of a Nation. I'm so glad, because I would have had to have been the critic years later to say, well, the grateful question, or the, the greatest question, would have totally, in the old days, gotten Griffith axed from the Jazz Singer. You know, I would have had to have come out with the other clues, but someone saw the greatest question and they're like, probably even around the time of the Jazz Singer, they're like, well, now he's effed up the black film twice. He's allowed to talk about Asians. But when he talks about black people, he always goes back to vaudeville with those shaky dances. And dude, let me tell you honestly, when I first saw Birth of a Nation, I thought I was going to puke. It was nasty, bro. And now I can watch it now I watch it and it just goes by and it's just beautiful vision, you know. But that there's these cowards that are against abolitionism is kind of my stance now, and how things go in the church and just everything you got to admit to, you know. Well, if you're part of a church of any kind, you can't really be that big of a fan on the way Birth of a Nation ends, because everybody gets killed. You know, everybody gets killed. So who knows? Maybe that did save the South in the end. But they didn't ever confront the idea that these Northern soldiers guys were like walking tall, kick your fucking ass dudes. And I don't mean to cuss, and everyone can turn this off now and think this isn't school. This is important for you to know on theories when it comes to race, class, and gender. The least of my worries is if some white guy blows off an N-word, you know. If he's trying to get me to say it, I might get into trouble, because usually I don't. There's really occasions that I do, but I wouldn't want to have to, because I'm trying to be a professor, and then it would go on the record that I said that word, and then I'm like, oh, I don't want that, you know. That's why I thought about that since I was a kid. Well, you can say some words that are offensive. You might be offended what I'm even saying. Even if a paper got turned in with some racial slurs on it, I'd count you a couple points off, but I'd let it go. I'm not going to go to, like, the exaggeration to ban you from school just because you've had racist thoughts even. But just remember what I'm telling you, everyone, that I've heard some really raunchy racist stuff come out of someone's mouth that wasn't a racist in any way. Except for that one moment, which was just them gobbledygooking about the nature of society. And I don't like that kind of presence, but if that happened once, I can't be the one to run right to him and be like, yeah, it's over for you. You had your one little sip of alcohol. You're back at Racist Anonymous, where you can't say racist words for the next 3 years, and then after that you shouldn't either. And I'm not trying to make light of the situation, because there's a lot going on with multiculturalism and civil rights, and people that need to have their voice heard, and people that need to get their objectivity on campus, and people that need to realize African Americans have contributed so much to not only cinema, but cinema history. And that's the next point I was going to make about the Jazz Singer. Another director that could have done it was someone that would have had a black actor be in it, but they had to have the Jewish story, mainly because Warner Brothers and everybody else was Judaic. They were born in the Jewish tradition. That Griffith made Judith of Bethulia with the Zionists of Hollywood, and they were all fans of the way Griffith did things. But Griffith was one of the ideas for the blackface, and every time there's blackface, I get screwed up, because I'm like, I don't like blackface. The reason I don't like it is because it's bad technically. Like, it's bad artistically. Like, all of a sudden, I'm going to say I'm a black dude? Like, I've even done high school ones where I put over you know, the helmet or whatever. Now I'm black, And then I found out that was really, really deducing someone else to being less than me. But that I was less than me made no sense because I'm not really black. And that'd be like them saying the black dude would have been cooler than me. And that's cool with me. I don't know how the latent world of racism works. I don't really care. But the point is I'm not going to do a role next where I have blackface. Neither. If I approach my friends with that role, they'd laugh me off. It's so old-fashioned, they'd say. So that's why it's technically aversive to me now. It's too old-fashioned, never used, and you're not supposed to use it. And Birth of a Nation tanked cover because of it. And if I find out the government's the one that keeps issuing the blackface, I'm going to be all mad at Dita Griffith for bringing the government back in. And thank you for ruining movies with the blackface. But that it's not that bad in this movie because you're like, that guy's so breathingly Jewish. When he goes to a synagogue, it's like he's blessing the frickin' beginning of the. It's like he might even perform at a bar mitzvah. He's reekingly Jewish, so who cares that he's putting on a little blackface? He's already putting himself out there as someone who's going to enter the world with ridicule. And that now he's dealing with the ridicule of his dad. He's dealing with the ridicule of his dad, who sings religious songs too, and then his dad finds out he's doing blackface. And then we're like, well, that movie Bamboozled by Spike Lee, we brought it up several times. And I'm not going to ask him why he was parodying or satirizing, probably because he thought it was a bad idea. Blackface. My thoughts on that is Spike Lee probably doesn't like blackface, but he put his friends through it to prove that that's the way situational comedies, even with black people on TV, are. They make you put on this like dark makeup. And so he's transferring the guilt of the filmmakers now that do TV with black guys and say that it's basically the same as a white guy wearing blackface. Or this guy's a black guy, but to really get people's attention, he puts on blackface. And now suddenly they're watching the show because it's a black guy in blackface. It's the media in a way that it turned out to be for Spike Lee, and I have to just tell all those guys, well, around my neighborhood, we know how to make movies because of the movie Belly. I'm sorry, it's still going around as the most. Everybody had it on VHS, the $5 VHS you get from Walmart. Everybody still got it, except me. Of course, I gave it to a girlfriend. But there are other things about the jazz singer that are weighing in, and one thing we got to keep in mind is African American cinema was already born in 1918. And it was with the movie Within Our Gates. And I have a history of reviewing that film, but I also found a copy of Within Our Gates, a bootleg. There were 3 bootlegs. And I bootlegged those all to the internet, and the internet all sent me a thank you, and it was to YouTube before I was really even having a YouTube account. And I bombed it with Within Our Gates. Now, Within Our Gates is on an old Criterion list somewhere as their first film, but it's out of print. But it's on the internet. You can find copies on the internet, because not just because of me, but because anyone else bootlegged that Within Our Gates to the Library of Congress off of YouTube. And I was the only one that I know did that. They said I did a great job. It took me until like a couple of years ago to actually get the credit for that, because I had to put more copies of Within Our Gates online and download a bunch of copies of them. And then I posted it as a Criterion collection thing on my YouTube. And so that's sitting there going, well, it gets back on there. And this is a new print that the Library of Congress just beat out like 2 weeks ago, bro. And they have like Within Our Gates flying there, and it's the first African American film. It rocks. It's like this Chicago's gang wars. It's big, dude. It's like Scorsese big. I mean, it's nuts, dude. Oscar Micheaux's Within Our Gates. And he did this one film with Paul Robeson called, and it also had, Paul Robeson, and it was called Body and Soul. And that was Paul Robeson was a black actor, and he was in the silent era with Body and Soul, and he was the corrupt preacher, the corrupt preacher. And for some reasons I won't ask, Oscar Micheaux always had a corrupt preacher in his movies, almost always. I didn't see all of his films because some of them are available to African Americans only. And I'm cool with that, dude. If you don't want me to watch a film for whatever reason, I don't care if it's just a shot of like a flower sitting there. If you don't want me to watch a movie, I won't. Like, I won't. Because sometimes I won't watch it. If you do want me to, like, if you're like, I want to show you this movie and there's really sex or death in it, I'm like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that, man. It's hidden in there and they're just tricking us. Well, I can't do anything about that, but I don't want to see that. I don't want to see porn. I don't want to see any of that other stuff. It's illegal to look at that. Whenever there's someone really getting hurt, it's illegal, right? In the movie, though. If someone gets hurt in the movie, then it's a liability to the whole price of the film. So they don't film things because of that. But I'm getting off the topic. Oscar show, directed Body and Soul, and it's a corrupt preacher genre, so the preacher gets beaten. Well, good versus evil usually comes about. I remember this shot within our gates where there's this black kid pretending to be hung. He's pretending to be hung, and these guys come in and they're like, "Oh, well, we already hanged him. Let's move on." You know? And the black kid like takes off his noose and goes walking off. That's better than the Joseph Smith one where Joseph Smith, boom, bombs open that slave plantation. This is real history, that he was a soldier of the North. All these black people come out. Some of them were mad at him, and this little kid is about to be hung, they're yelling. So they go over and they see this kid about to be hung, totally within our gates, only this time the kid is about to be hung, so they go over and pick him up and set him down and get rid of all those people that were going to hang him. And they're riding off, and the kid's just like, didn't say a word, he's just kind of following them. And they look over the hill, and this is Civil War history, because I've had to study Civil War history for a BFI book I wrote on the Birth of the Nation shot-by-shot analysis. It's not in favor or really against the film, but that is one of my favorite movies for other reasons, for like almost Gone with the Wind reasons. And that is, see, bringing up Joseph Smith's another reason I love Birth of the Nation, because he's not in it. Like, Ulysses S. Grant makes one scene in the whole film. None of the historical figures, well, Abraham Lincoln's all through it, like Daniel Day-Lewis, bro. He's all chilling through the whole thing till he gets capped. But sometimes the war lasts after the war, and Birth of a Nation, you'll notice, lasts a while past Lincoln's assassination. That's not the last thing to happen. So it isn't too absurd to say that the Klan not only helped wreck the South at first, but that they brought it back from the grave and reanimated it, so to say. And some of those Klansmen even went later with Joseph Smith after he pretty much destroyed the Southern Army with a couple other captains. And some of those Klansmen made off with Joseph Smith. They're like, well, if you can't beat him, join him. Let's go to the other side. So really, Birth of a Nation's complex. But I liked the fact that there were Northern heroes that didn't like abolitionism just because Abraham Lincoln told them not to. Where are the movies about these Northern advocates for the Civil War? They say it was Southern because of Griffith all those years, and then Santa Fe Trail kind of changed that. But I got to be a little careful on this too, because I don't really have problem with flags like Mexican flag or African flag. Or you want to throw an African flag at a football game? I'm okay with that. But I'm not okay with the banishment of Confederate flags. Because the banishment of Confederate flags puts me in a lot of trouble, because see, Pantera, they've got Confederate flags on their albums. So now I'm going, wait, I can't get rid of my Pantera and be unchristian-like to get rid of my Pantera. So, we'll just discuss among censorship, like, are there any symbols that can't be seen? No. No symbol should be banned from a movie. You don't believe me? I'm going to have symbols in my next movie. They'll be symbolic. So just don't tell me you can't have symbols in a movie. Don't care what it symbolizes, really. But that you want symbols in a movie, I'm okay with. Even the frickin' huge-ass Confederate flag in Gone with the Wind really does serve a purpose. The purpose is to show how big they were on this, like, Southern Utopia, that they were building up the Southern Utopia. And so there is a scene in Gone with the Wind that has the biggest Confederate flag you'll ever see, and that was almost what they named Gone with the Wind. No, I'm kidding. But it's the biggest Confederate flag you'll ever see, and because of that Confederate flag, the rest of us have been waving the Confederate flag. But I will say this, not all of us aren't on the side of the North. Like all of us white guys that study the history were like, well, that noble captain of the South really did treat his slaves good, and the rest of us on the northern side are like, they still have slaves? Oh my gosh, are they going to, like, destroy them? Are they going to, like, hurt them? Are they going to hurt him sexually? So we get like, so now the Klan's nervous for real because they're like, nobody better be having interracial relationships, So now they're putting out an archetype for that. And here comes the North ready to clobber the South because they think they're going to sleep with them. And then some of them have already heard me that way. I don't want to get into it because nobody wants to get into it. Church history doesn't want to get into it. Okay. But the Northern soldiers that fought the good fight were even by the South considered as great leaders. So that they rejoined with some of the rascalier ones from the South that came their way because they realized that was the only thing they could do is just the way war turned out. Now, I'm not saying that it all turned out for the better, but this is like cinema history. 1895 is right around the time the Civil War was over. So now you've got D.W. Griffith's grandpa, who's a Southern captain, and all this is coming out like these biographies about Griffith. He's like, no wonder his career ended when it does. He said it's going to, and he's going to go to war. He predicted it. But we should be talking about the Al Jolson factor in Body and Soul. That's where Paul Robeson in Body and Soul, that Paul Robeson would have been an excellent jazz singer. But get this, Paul Robeson's in a musical by James Whale. It's Showboat. He's in Showboat, and it's a black and white movie from Image M. And it actually hurt Image M's budget at that time, even though they were one of the biggest studio ever. And the movie Freaks did too. And that Showboat wasn't a big success, but everybody knew that song so well by Paul Robeson, Old Man River. And that they could absolutely recite the words to Old Man River, at least the Old Man River part. It's like, give me that old time religion, baby. So, Old Man River. I wish I could play it on the soundtrack. We're listening to Dead Tell Your Riders right now. But it's like album 19, Into the Dragon. There's this weird water spill thing going on in the background. We built a waterfall. One of those waterfalls that goes upward. We built one of those. I don't want to talk about it too much because we built a mirror camera too once. Remember how wild Masterclass was when I told you I built a mirror cam, but I didn't build it. One of my producers built it. So you can see yourself in the image of the film because there's a reflection off the film or off the digital medium. Yeah, so ultimately the Warner Brothers had so much success with the opening release of this movie, The Jazz Singer, that they had so much success that in spite of its blackface and the future blackface used in Orson Welles' Othello, which really was offensive to me. I mean, I like Orson Welles, but doesn't he have African American friends he can vouch for by now? And does that make him look kind of sappy that he took his own part upon? Well, probably everybody else told him they didn't want to work on it at the last minute, and he didn't want to admit that. I can relate to that. But anyway, they shouldn't have done blackface in any scenario, and The Jazz Singer is a worse use of it than perhaps Othello, which is trying to be this valiant black hero that's being killed by everyone in the kingdom the next day, It's Shakespeare's multicultural plight, but The Jazz Singer, I gotta say, is a great movie, and the music in it kicks ass. It's not all Louis Armstrong, a lot of it is Al Jolson's voice that he sang into a can machine, and they recorded it, shook it out later. That every single theater in Hollywood was given the special effect, and this is the big special effect, of sound film. Everything before that had been silent film. They called it that not because there wasn't music in the theater, either from the film or down at the orchestra, but from the film later in the history of silent film. That from 1895 until The Jazz Singer came out, film was silent except for an Alice Guy movie, which was appreciating French, and it had this sort of recording in it. And that Thomas Edison did have to do with the invention of sound, we don't go into anymore because Thomas Edison did really lie about a lot of the things he said he invented. Like when he said he invented cinema, he was lying, and what he did do was electrocute an elephant, and I wasn't very happy about that. I know some collectioners are like, well, it's just euthanasia of an old elephant, or whatever excuse they use. I don't want to see a dying animal in a movie. Come on now. No. I'm sorry we had to get into all that controversy to say the special effect class is what we're here for, but now we get a little taste of film criticism through all that. But the special effect that wiring sound came right around the time Even World War One was over, right around the time that Griffith was signing into the military. He would make The Struggle and Abraham Lincoln, and those movies have special effects, mostly sound special effects. While The Slave Ship and Abraham Lincoln was probably one hell of a special effect, being the set bill. This, having singing in it, is a special effect, not just because it's the first sound film, but singing in it is the highlight. So now the musical is invented, and I have this theory that everything that's ever happened in the history of movies, from the beginning of silent film to the jazz singer, everything had been done that you can possibly do in cinema. I've seen some movies like Flaming Creatures that maybe prove that likewise. But that everything had been done for cinema since 1895 all the way through 1927. And that's because of the jazz singer. Now the musical was born, and the only thing the silent era hadn't done was a musical. Go figure. And even a music like video. They did cut some of their technical scenes to sound like even in Greed, but the truth is that they started, when they had musicals where you could hear the singing, then they started tracking the shots and the scenes to the scenes that they're singing and dancing on. And if you put that as the highlight, the singing and dancing, like he's dancing great in this, it's stereotypes of African American. I'm not happy about that, but that the moves are fantastic. That they're trying to valorize the black race. I'm not going to get into because they're saying only they could be black, only they could be black musicians as good as this, and that they're trying to valorize it like they're trying to valorize in Birth of a Nation these black dudes that are like sellouts, but they're like we're do whatever you say, so there's some problems with that. That's why make it a race issue anyway? Why can't Al Jolson just be the singer? There had to have been, like, Buddy Kaye was the singer in his. And so the blackface and then Bamboozled put the end to blackface, because Bamboozled's like, don't use it again. But if you think about the special effect of blackface, it's the one special effect that died with Othello, and it should not ever be used again except Bamboozled. And that there's no reason to use blackface, and it makes you technically kind of cheap on your filmmaking, because now you're like cheapening it, that you can't afford a real African American in your movie because their salaries are too lucrative. And I'm not saying to go bribe somebody to be in a movie, but I'm sure that even back then, because Oscar Michaud existed, that they would have had black actors. Louis Armstrong almost getting the part doesn't really faze me. Griffith buying the best special effect for everybody for 20 years. The Magic J, priceless. But you gotta think of the fact that they wired all the cinemas with sound, so now they're seeing the music part, and the music part's what's entertaining. So from here on out, even though Broadway musical already worked this way and was already existing, the characters that would set up the song would realize the song was the special effect, because everyone wants to hear the special effect of the song, and that's because you have to wire it for sound film to get it a song. And so now they're all doing these musicals. By 1929, they were already making these Broadway musicals on screen, and it was like, I can't think of the name of the film exactly, but it has these dancers and singers all through it. Broadway Review of 1940s like that with Fred Astaire. But the Broadway Melody, there you go, the Broadway Melody of 1929 is all these actors, and they've got the big dresses on, they've got the big tuxedos on. This is where the Ziegfeld Follies comes in as a special effect because of the Al Jolson's jazz singer, and the Ziegfeld Follies had been going on since vaudeville, but it's acceptable medium of cinema because everybody's a good actor and everybody has to standard the quality that you get these chorus line movies later, and I'm talking about the musical because Al Jolson, jazz singer, and it's, I gotta look at this box, it says it's directed by Alan Crossland. Now I gotta fail you all here because I'm not a big knowledgeable person on Alan Crossland, other than I read this book and he was like the third assistant director. So he must have been working with even D.W. Griffith on this, and that nothing really, that Griffith led an eccentric second part of his life in the war, and that he was there when they liberated the Holocaust, and he actually had a huge role in liberating the Holocaust by Louis Armstrong ejected out of his plane, and Griffith should have hit the alarm, but instead went down and crashed on Dachau. How he crashed on Dachau, nobody knows, but he got out, realized that there were some casualties. The Mexican army came and helped D.W. Griffith back to his plane, which had already been taken out. And he sounded the alarm, and John Ford and all the night raiders or whatever they were, and all the African American soldiers, and like the Red Tails, everybody just came across, and they're not only coming to kill Hitler now, but they're confirming that the same Holocaust they knew about in Diary of a Nazi Spy, or Confessions of a Nazi Spy, and the same Holocaust D.W. Griffith and Charlie Chaplin were trying to point out in The Great Dictator, which they did have the concentration camps in The Great Dictator. Then America finally was like, that's going on and we got to stop it. And I'm not saying anybody's late or anything, because nobody really understood it. Sometimes you look at something, you don't understand it, and then later you look at it and you're like, I got to stop it. But the great special effect of sound comes from two mediums. It comes from sound on disc and sound on film. And the sound, it's a mystery kind of how sound waves work. The top registry kind of goes this way out of the wavelength, and the bottom registry kind of goes this way of the wavelength. So the lowest bass and the highest point of treble is where that wavelength is, even on the film one. And it's not different on a disc, but I gotta be honest with you, engineering isn't exactly my final say. Like, if I had to stop this show and reinvent a camera, like Stanley Kubrick halfway through Barry Lyndon, he's like, let's light it all in candlelight, start over, and let's use a camera I just invented called the candlelight camera, and it can see in candlelight. I personally think that's cool as Stanley Kubrick, and proves that he's a genius beyond his level, and I only rag on him in this class because now he's like the new Griffith Kubrick. Oh, he went too far, that Kubrick. Oh, he broke the rules in Spartacus, Kubrick. Oh, why was he doing this in this movie, Kubrick? So it seems like Kubrick's the new whipping boy. Besides, now that everybody knows D.W. Griffith put the off button on the Holocaust. John Ford served Germany their papers, like in this picture I saw. John Ford going to serve Berlin their papers in Germany year zero. I can just picture John Ford in a foreign country going to serve him. You lost the war pictures, bro. And I won't even get into what I found out about some other things, but I won't get into how I found out Mein Kampf is actually a decent book, and it's all misconstrued even in the movie, and that it's all answers to a Nietzsche exam called Triumph of the Will Essays, and that Mein Kampf is a Triumph of the Will Nietzsche essay, kind of put things in perspective. And now, I'm not being overruled or anything, I'm obeying the powers that be, but I'm not counting you all as slam hard racism from all the things you're thinking of that I'm saying, and all the things you're thinking of when you watch The Jazz Singer. I'm not gonna flunk you if you say, well, the stupid special effect is blackface. That's what I said, but now you're coming across racist and I tricked you. No, I'm not doing that here. I'm not doing any more of the cop-out sermons that the minute I hear you say one racist thing, I'm not going to jump up and can you from class. There are professors that will, but I'm not one of them. There's my advantage of being a professor. I'm not going to can you for saying something offensive. Man, if I canned anyone for saying something offensive, it'd be the movie kingdom. And I think we should just keep thinking about Stanley Kubrick for a minute, because the sound system and how it works and recordings of it, like the recordings of the camera, I can kind of see as imprints against the timeline as where it would have to play the note. That I don't really know the induction behind what plays it, except for that it's like a telecine, it runs the stock. And it's all comes from developing special effects. And that sound was a special effect in Jazz Singer. Yeah, we're going to go with it. So that I got off the subject and race characteristics and all those things. And since I got off the subject of special effects, except that sound in later Ziegfeld Follies would have these huge apparatuses of in-camera and other mirror camera and whatever else in their films. And the musicals became so big in the 50s that they were the biggest genre. MGM is still number one. And the special effects were making these dream-like landscapes, like in The Red Shoes when she's dancing in a dream. Lots of special effects in that scene. Dissolves, clouds of fog. Dissolves and clouds of fog work well because the dissolve takes you through, and then the cloud of fog is right there. Now, this is one we don't normally talk about in special effects class, but I had to bring this up to special effects class because we have to wonder at certain times when we're watching a movie like this, how much of it was made for the movie and how much was a changing of the way the scene was filmed. And I think Kubrick's final movie is controversial, not just because of the subject matter, but because it wasn't, for one thing, it wasn't near as strange as the book it was based on, not just the Freud book, but other people had written the dream novel, and it was going around as this kind of unauthored book called the Dream Novel, and it was dreams. A lot of it was dream journals that came out with stories that were so bizarre and perplexing you would think the ghost alien demons had landed. And speaking of ghost alien demon, around this time in the 90s, everybody was making multiple endings of their film just for the heck of it. And they would spend money on the multiple endings. Like, I remember one time in the 90s, from like 95 to 99, and this one fits that too. Everybody in Hollywood had a multiple endings movie, especially with the multiple ending of not only Eyes Wide Shut, but of movies that had already been made, and they were doing the satanic ending. I'm not even joking when I tell you that like a ton of movies were doing that. Like, so then cannibals showed up, ate everybody, and killed everyone on the set. They would make those endings. And here's a tragic tale, more tragic than the downfall of Eyes Wide Shut, which never happened because everybody has a copy and loves it. The downfall wasn't really a downfall, but my favorite director is really changing, and I might have to say because my favorite writer was now someone that served homelessness. I can't really tell you how you might cry at this, people, but my friend Quentin Tarantino, he doesn't know me. I've met him a couple of times. He doesn't know me, but I consider him a friend now. You know why? Because right after Pulp Fiction, he didn't tell anybody this, but he had to go homeless for a while. And nobody likes to hear that story, and I don't mean to bring that story up, and if that's a sore subject for some people, I'll just move on. But nobody's mad at you in the business just because you're great McGinty homeless, and no one's going to judge you for that. Probably the truest people are like, you mean you can be homeless and still have a success in your career? You can have success in your career and still wind up on the sidewalk, whether you're spending all your money on pot or not. I know that's the next thing that someone would have said if it was still illegal. But now that it's legal, they're like, no, spending your money on pot doesn't make you homeless. What is it? And that's not what made them homeless. They just got hit with a landlord misunderstanding and had to go homeless for, 8 months or something. And it's a horrible story. And if anyone thinks they owe them reparations just for fun, that's cool. And they don't owe me reparations because I'm still paying off mine, right? But if he's on the way down and out, I'm going to be really sad because when I was down and out in Hollywood, everybody thought I was cool. I would hang out with celebrities, blah, 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 went to USC, homeless, but everybody thought I was cool. But a lot of homeless people can be like homeless for a long time and still everybody really likes you and is your friend. And I didn't mean to bring that up on some kind of economic level because Tarantino's made more money than Zor Beelzebub himself, which really means we all need to donate to Zor Beelzebub at the Church of Heaven's Gravel. And I'm a missionary for that church, but I can't really talk about why nobody else can get in there. No, that's my shot. Speaking of Heaven's Gravel, this is about the occult and the strange things hidden behind doors and the castles in the sky. And I've seen this castle that's in this movie, and I was taken to it, and I was going to CALARTS, and it's really haunted and scary. But check this out. It's not only haunted and scary, there's these crazy orgies bursting out with what look like to be what I would hope are what porn stars look like, because that may prove that I've never seen porn, and this is not porn, but there is sex in it. That there's sex in it and there's not porn doesn't make it all right technically in the non-porn line, but I don't care. Because if it's a movie that tells a story and it's Stanley Kubrick, why would you razz on him for having like this crazy satanic occultic sex mechanical thing? Like in his Freemasonry, everybody brings up Freemasonry, not at all. Like what are the Hughes brothers bringing up in From a Hell? And anyways, the Freemasonry thing is so tired that Stanley Kubrick realized he'd cast the Illuminati in a film and show it. Now, is there a clip of Kubrick dying in this film? I don't know. If I found out there was, in one case, I'd make an exception because I don't really like this movie, but I do. See, I don't really like it because it's kind of like, guy walks around town, sees a couple pretty girls, his wife's really beautiful, he's happy with her, but she's unhappy with him. So he walks around and realizes that there's some sexy ladies. And his wife would kill him if he did anything, so he doesn't do anything. There's never a scene where Tom Cruise and the chick mounts. We have a little feeling that, like, maybe Lily Sobieski, because he gives her a hug, or he gives this girl a hug, that, like, make it seem like they might have been, like, together. But whether they were or not, that's not the point of the movie, obviously, because he doesn't get any. And, like, Nicole Kidman's having, like, this whole flashback to a sailor she cheated on him once. I mean, it's all pushing Tom Cruise towards repression, and that's what I love about it. But I don't really like that they're all trying to repress Tom Cruise. I'm not really sure if he knows that's what's going on. And I don't think it's really cool to repress Tom Cruise. And so if Tom Cruise is hearing this, I know some girls that are hot that would love to get with you. That if I send them your way because Kubrick repressed you, would you understand? I'm getting back to no, don't send them. Gold diggers were a thing of my past. Okay, all right, gold diggers were a thing of his past. To think that Tom Cruise would turn down a gold digger. I'm so shocked. Well, my girlfriends aren't all gold diggers. I'm going to send him anyway. But only the ones that are cool with going to see him, because he's going to call you a gold digger and shut you out of his house. Which is almost what happens at the end of Eyes Wide Shut. When Nicole Kidman finds a mask on Tom Cruise's bed and probably already knows it's the frickin' mask of Red Death. Because it proves that he was at this club where he said he had a dream and was. Nobody really knows how that went down. And that it's a beautiful movie to look at, but the special effects here aren't just a weird orgy scene, but the sound effects I'm talking about, because we talked about Jazz Singer. And sound effects can be sound special effects like they were for music. But in this one, there's a bunch of backmasking. Now, backmasking is where you record something backwards, so that way when you play it forwards, it sounds like you saying it backwards. So you don't have to even, if you record something backwards and play it back, it's going to play back backwards. You would think it would do the opposite, but see, it's already going the same way when it's playing. When you rewind it, it goes the same way when it's playing. But if you record it backwards, then it gets the recording backwards when you play it. Oh, it's confusing, and we used to do that as kids with, like, stuff we'd put. I have to admit, Arm McConnell notwithstanding, when we were little kids and didn't know there was a band on Stairway, we used to put our own subliminal messages into it about how the devil was going to come eat us and shit. It was funny. But you could mess with. I had backmasking in one movie that sounded horrible. I had backmasking on my Satanic Incorporated CD, which is real occultish and satanic, even more so out of the closet with the Eyes Wide Shut. And the Satanic Incorporated for the Dead Tape Writers is one of those get a master's at Harvard with it and then turn in my movies. You know, it's like turn in something at Harvard that they'll never forget. So I'm like, well, I got this comparative lit paper just for them, you know, and it's about how, like, every great book could be compared to the Satanic Bible. Now, I don't know if Kubrick was a Satanist, but in the 90s, with all those satanic endings they're spending money on, I'm not really doubting that he was going down that road, but that he wasn't preachy about it's kind of to his name, because that means it was kind of kept secret what they were doing in this film. And that it was kind of tame what they were doing leads me to the fact that there's more than one version of the film. And the backmasking has a lot to do with that. There's a version that has the Evander Holyfield midget scene in it. Like, don't ask me. And this one, it's like got scenes that were like in The Shining, you know, with the bear and the dude and the chick with the swamp thing that we talked about yesterday. And that's funny that we talked about 2 Kubricks in a row. Way to go, Kubrick, you're making it back up on the list. But the insinuation of the backmasking, I've never rewound and played. So if you want to get extra credit, see what they're saying backwards. I just liked that they were saying something backward. I was so amazed that they were saying something backward in the movie that I lost track of the fact that I was going to rewind it and have my computer say what they said backwards. And I'm sure somewhere on Google I could even check it out. And this is what they say backwards in Eyes Wide Shut. But that might have just got shut off the internet or wasn't ever on there. But the point is there were multiple versions. There were endings that were satanically apocalyptic. There's one, but in all the versions, the backmasking might as well attest to this. I don't remember Tom Cruise getting laid in any of those versions, and he kept telling Kubrick, no, it's going to hurt Nicole Kidman's feeling if I get laid. And even if he made that up because she said to say that, I still like her a lot. She's a friend. I know her. She's cool. We knew each other years ago. But I gotta say, for as inty plated as Tom Cruise is coming out in all these movies, I gotta send him some girls to see if he's okay. But not like in a gold digger way. Alright. So, Eyes Wide Shut, the special effect, I'm gonna say it's the same kind of special effect as Jazz Singer. An interview with sound in a way you haven't before. Now, the ultimate sound movies are like the musicals of the 70s, especially because the main one is Nashville. And in Nashville, all the characters had to learn to play instruments and then write songs with those instruments and then perform those songs in a movie that they wrote and that they learned to play the instrument. Chris Christopherson won for I'm Too Easy in 1975 when Nashville came out. Nashville, however, does this beautiful montage of sound that should go in and out of singing even way smoother than the jazz singer, way on the other end of the spectrum of smooth than the jazz singer. So, Nashville has all these multiple tracks, and multiple tracks burn down to the main one, and I think that's the most complicated soundtrack. But I can't think of a movie that would unleash the soundtrack with the visuals so harshly than to put backwards saying. So that's all I'm talking about today is sound effects. It's not sound effects, but special effects. Sound effects are cool, but they rarely use them in movies unless they're Foleying something, which is where they record the sound of someone walking later. That's kind of like what they're doing in Monty Python with the coconuts, like being a Foley artist. But those are sound effects that are used to project the movie forward, and that they always have those nowadays. But there's a minimal use of sound effects, like except in like a costume superhero movie where they punch someone in the face, and then instead of having the large POW card, you'd hear the special sound effect because it's not really hitting the dude in real life because you can't show harm in film. But the regular music track that would evolve into kind of this way of keeping track of the underscore, especially for like Jules and Jim later on, which would have this da 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 da, like film score all throughout that keeps getting cycled back in. That's around the idea for the jazz singer when they're cycling in an underscore because there's kind of this band. You can hear the band in the background. But the underscore on Eyes Wide Shut's on it. There's 4 tracks usually, and the underscore is one of them, and the background noise and the background special effects are one of them. And then the regular sound, like speech dialogue included, are the 4 soundtracks that you master every other track down to, so you can play it as a recording on digital. And recording on digital actually with sound helps enhance the sound beyond the image. Yes, that's true. But Kubrick, of all people, had to do one last shimmy sham thing and make the movie so sensational that everybody admit that it was boring, and that at the end we all forget that there was backmasking. We're supposed to go check and see what it's supposed to do. So I'll do you all a favor. If I can research what the backmasking was, nah, you guys do it. I'm a hard teacher, dang it. I'm a hard teacher, and you have to go find out what's backmasked in Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. And if it ends up being the N-word dude, I'm going to be a little disappointed, but I won't fire him. Alright, that was special effects for today. We talked about the soundtrack, sound effects track, background sound, and the underscore. The underscore, again, was in the Eyes Wide Shut was underscores of like Sibelius, was in the trailer, and so they have it cut to music, and that cutting to music was like already happening with Broadway Melody, and that's how the musical lent its form to the craft, because first it was to mitigate sound film, and then it was to like necessitate sound film, and then it was to like show off how big the films could get and show off the Technicolor and then these dreamlike musical numbers that were famous ever since the Red Shoes. And those balances of color are really interactive. Those balances of color of those musicals is really spectacular. You really get this vibrant image of orange and glows. And like in Jumbo, there's this special effect where Doris Day is like there's this fire pit in her carriage or something, keeping her warm. And it's just so godlike and perfect. And I don't even believe in God, but it's like the fireplace just burning on the Technicolor is just so a romantic symbol. I'll never forget that, because of the way the color looks, and because the musical was mitigated from Jazz Singer on, because everybody had to have sound in their new film, whether it was a gimmick or not. They all wanted sound in the film. And this is where I'll end it. The myth of total cinema predicted that one day there would be sound, and this was a prediction they made after there was sound, but they already knew that. But he's like saying, well, sound was necessary for film to be more realistic. The only thing I have against Bazan saying sound is necessary to make the film more realistic is, does that mean we have to have scratch and sniff movies from now on and smell our movie? Well, there's some Cheech and Chong movies I would want to smell. I don't know. Maybe it's because visual and audio are two cues you can get from recordings, but not smelling. Well, in polyester, they had a scratch and sniff, let's see what smell is next card, and I heard some of those smells were awful. But at least they experienced the film more. But I'm sure, no, but actually sound did contribute because of later technical advancements. That technology made advancements, and to argue against the case of technology is pointless at this point, because we're all saying, well, this sound was a good idea because it enhances everything. But we're realizing smell-o-vision may not enhance everything, and taste-o-vision hasn't even come. If I could reach through that monitor, grab a cheeseburger and hork it down, I would, bro, if I had the holodeck sitting there. But not to worry. We're all getting by. We're all doing okay. We all know what sound contributes to film. Sometimes it's cool to make silent films. After that, yes. In a unique way or whatever. I've done a silent film since the silent era ended. I wasn't alive for the silent era. And I'm not arguing that sound isn't the most important thing. Because actually, I do think sight is one of those characteristics you have to have for the early silent cinema, so sight's the most important. But that the magazine Sight and Sound, that the recording of sound and the replaying of sound, there were all these big companies like putting sound on disc, like Warner Brothers for the Jazz Singer sometimes would put the sound on disc, and then discovering sound on film, and now the ease of digital, like this is a digital program, and my voice you're hearing is recorded while the visual program is going on. And it's only a special effect, like I've explained, because it's a camera default. And everything you're hearing me say is going back to you off of the soundtrack. That I'm making it on this camera that's a phone doesn't disqualify it from kind of a special effect or an effect. A normal effect of a film now is to hear what the person's saying. I know this is blowing your mind, I'm sure. No, I'm kidding. All right, well, I'll see you next time, and I'll try not to get so hung up on the politics part of it, because everyone's booing me for that. Why'd you waste our time with the politics part? And it really was only to let you guys off the hook for your politics card. But anyway, I'm going to tell you, because if you own Belly, you have your politics card in my book, in some black teacher's book or something. So don't worry. Just bring it with you to college. Well, I like this movie for some reason. And it has special effects in it too, but I'm not really going to talk about the violent special effects, really. I mean, there's blood and guts in some movies, like some war movies, but I'm not going around to saying that it was all irresponsible filmmaking, like Saving Private Ryan's not irresponsible filmmaking, neither is The Godfather. To hear me say that would just turn me into Joseph Breen from like the 50s and say, like, there are no good movies, we have to end them all. Sorry, I didn't mean to make fun of Joseph Breen, because he was I was one of the last people he met on Earth, and he endowed me to go around and only condemn Stanley Kubrick, but I remember even condemning Eyes Wide Shut, and I can't condemn that movie. It's so good. All right, we'll talk to you all in a few days. We'll be back for more masterclass. Good night, good day.